It started with a celebration.
This Kansas City is going absolutely crazy.
But then, challenge.
The state's first death.
Fears surge over the coronavirus.
COVID exposed our broken systems.
Together, we pressed forward.
We're willing and open to make some changes.
It is our responsibility to step up.
Through a year
Cases of COVID-19
like no other.
This is a public health crisis.
The federal government promised us this money.
KMBC 9 News was right there.
Let me break this down.
The 7-day rolling average of new cases.
Seeking
We
answers.
started asking direct questions.
Providing facts.
A long line of folks waiting to vote.
Shining a spotlight on the path forward.
I have seen this community rise.
Now, with the promise of a new year.
Who will be the first to get the vaccine?
One thing is certain. We're here for you. KMBC 9 News, leading the way. Leading the way. You're watching KMBC 9 News at 6.
Today is a huge day in the fight against the coronavirus pandemic. American healthcare workers on the front lines are now being vaccinated, but it comes as the country passes 300,000 COVID deaths. Hello, I'm Laura Moritz. A critical care nurse in New York City is among the first people in the United States to be vaccinated. Sandra Lindsay works at Long Island Jewish Medical Center in Queens. Lindsay said it didn't feel any different than any other vaccine. We now know those ultra-cold vials of vaccine arrived here in the metro before noon today. We have coverage on both sides of the state line as the distribution is already underway in both Kansas and Missouri. We begin with our Michael Mahoney at Truman Medical Center. Michael?
Laura, the Truman CEO, Charlie Shields, says their first shipment of vaccine got here very early this morning. In the middle of the afternoon, an intensive care unit nurse that deals with COVID patients all the time got the very first vaccination. One small shot, one big step.
It feels like a little bit of hope, a little bit of light, a little bit of chance that we might start to see some healing.
Keel has worked in the ICU COVID unit since the start of this. The first doses arrived at Truman early today. They won't say how many they have, and they expect to get resupplied weekly.
Kansas City has been under COVID-19 restrictions for months.
I do not think we've rushed back in.
Now there may be light at the end of the tunnel.
People who can't get paid unemployment benefits are protesting in Topeka. We're here to tell you what they're saying.
He was one of Kansas City's first black police officers.
I guess the question is today, how far have we come? Not far. Not far enough.
The hope Alvin Brooks has for our future. Kansas City, Missouri is easing some COVID-19 restrictions. Good evening, I'm Laura Moritz. The city is not going back to before the pandemic, but it will be less rigid. Restaurants and bars can go back to regular hours. The capacity restrictions are being removed, but they're going to be strict about enforcing the face mask and social distancing rules. KMBC 9's Michael Mahoney has more on why they're doing this now. Michael?
Laura, the mayor says that the city's declining trend on COVID cases is a major factor in this. Now, the restriction easing was expected, but the scope of this is surprising.
Now, there are still thousands of people who have questions for the Kansas Department of Labor, so they showed up at the state capitol to protest. Investigative reporter Matt Fleener went to Topeka to hear their message.
Here at the Kansas State Capitol in Topeka, there weren't that many people that showed up to a protest against the Kansas Department of Labor, but those that did had very compelling stories.
I don't know, it's just very stressful. I have 3 kids. This is people losing their livelihoods, their homes.
Several of them have not received a check from the Kansas Department of Labor in months.
Governor Kelly and her constituents want to get together and send me a mortgage payment. That'd be great, but I don't see that happening.
People spend hours a day calling the department's hotline, but so many people are calling they cannot get through. A woman from Olathe organized this protest, and she's doing more in the coming weeks. She wants people to understand just how deeply the Labor Department's trouble affects people.
I don't want to stand out here in the cold. I've got other things that I could be doing, but we're left with no other choice.
Governor Laura Kelly issued a statement today about the protest saying that I want the remaining claimants who are still owed benefits to know that all of our energy is focused on getting them paid. Still, a lot of people need that payment right now. Matt Fleener, KMBC 9 News.
Aside from short-term fixes, the Labor Department says it could take 2 to 3 years to modernize the entire unemployment system.
we're all still worrying about our health, our jobs, everything.
I got to get back to work.
The federal government promised us this money.
Listen to me, let me open legally.
And what it's going to look like, going to a restaurant, going to a store, going anywhere.
There are a lot of restaurants at risk.
They call it the 10-10-10 plan.
Things may be different on both sides of the state line.
One thing is for sure, you can count on us to keep asking questions, to keep getting answers, to keep helping you get to the other side.
This is a KMBC KCWE editorial with President and General Manager Sarah Smith.
While many families enjoy spending time together as we shelter at home, others find themselves trapped and unable to escape their abuser. Those able have reported domestic violence, but there are many more unreported, from those more isolated than ever during this pandemic. Violence of any kind is tragic, but that from the hand of someone who professes love is even more heinous. Domestic violence is often kept secret as those who are abused are ashamed, scared, or unable to report their abuser. And abusers often promise each time is the last, only to repeat the cycle. Stop the cycle and get help. If you or a loved one is being abused, call 816-HOTLINE. And if you are an abuser, call 816-505-4805. Serving both states. Get the help you need to rebuild the bonds you once vowed to cherish.
KMBC and KCWE welcome responsible replies to this editorial. What happens next, where we go, and how we get there safely.
We continue tracking coronavirus in Kansas and Missouri.
As stories change, so does our coverage. Witness events that will define our generation.
Protesters are marching in the middle of the street.
The moments that will change your tomorrow, and the facts that will move us forward. No matter who you are, where you get the facts matters.
We're going to bring you the latest.
We're live at News Chopper 9.
This is the place where more of Kansas City stays connected. KMBC 9 News. Right now on KMBC 9 News at 6.
It has been 3 days of unrest in Kansas City, Missouri. More than 150 protesters have been arrested since Friday night. Businesses were damaged. Police used tear gas to break up the crowds, and some people were hurt. Demonstrations have been organized all across the country in response to the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Thousands are calling for racial justice and police accountability. KMBC 9's Michael Mahoney is on the ground in Kansas City with protesters. Michael, there's no curfew tonight, and you've also noticed a change in this protest in just the last few moments.
Yeah, Haley, in the last few minutes, the tone here of this 100 or so protesters has changed markedly. Let me step out of the way. What happened was some of these protesters tried to get into the street here, the intersection of 47th and Cleaver Boulevard here at the J.C. Nichols Parkway. The police line advanced and moved toward them. Some of them remained out on the street, and there was harsh words. There were close encounters. There were a bunch of profanity. It looks like order has been restored now, but things are a lot more tense than they were 15 or 20 minutes ago.
Protesters have been back on the plaza for a few hours now, and we have more team coverage for you tonight. KMBC 9's Bianca Beltran is live on the plaza. Bianca, you've been covering these protests now for the past couple of days, including late into last night. We see people starting to march now. How does today compare so far to what you've seen over the past couple days?
Thank you for being here.
Well, Emily, you can see behind me now that protesters are marching in the middle of the street down Main Street, and this has caused drivers to turn around because they are headed straight down Main Street to 47. And we'll give you a view of the crowd here. Dozens, if not hundreds of people, arm in arm, marching to support the message of Black Lives Matter. And how it compares to yesterday is we're seeing a lot of this movement marching in the streets. Both the demonstrators and law enforcement have adjusted the way they are operating to the growing crowd.
Still proceeding northbound, not seeing any vandalism or anything like that. Still seeing the signs held up, but it has a completely different feel, and we're 5 minutes away from the curfew, so that tells you right there that these folks are not going to make the curfew unless they're walking home right now. So then what will police decide to do, and how will they do it?
And as you can see, dozens and dozens of people are holding still. They're keeping their place despite these. Okay, so we see a group running now as officers approach them. more items being thrown at the officers. And now we're seeing tear gas. We're seeing people running frantically as that smoke, that gas fills the air.
If Bianca Beltran is back with us, Bianca, hi. I hope you're okay. You and your crew and everybody where you are right now.
We are okay. That initial tear gas was very difficult. It caused burning in the eyes, in the nose, in the mouth. So when you couldn't breathe out of your nose, if you sucked air into your mouth, it burned. It caused gagging. It caused coughing. And I'm sure my makeup is messed up right now. My eyes are still teary, but I wanted to bring you a live look at what is happening right now. And I think that what we are seeing is protesters are not backing down. Several times they have deployed tear gas. The protesters have tried to get away from that. We see there are tools out here such as milk, and one person has a leaf blower trying to get that gas away. And once they are recuperated and the gas has dissipated, they return, getting close to the police officers that are in a line now in that intersection that we have been watching all afternoon. And we have seen some people moving dumpsters, moving barricades toward the police. We see behind us now. The crowd is throwing bottles at us now. So we're going to step away from that. But just to let you know that this tear gas deployment has made people very angry, very upset, on top of the emotions that we were seeing today. And I feel it. I feel the effects of the tear gas, and it is difficult. But they are not backing down. They are continuing to stand out here in the streets and move closer to the police. Right now there is a gap because I think they are prepared for more tear gas. So it's just a cycle that we are watching here, and now we are getting water bottles thrown at us. So we're going to cover for safety. Chris, back to you.
All right. Do what you need to do to be safe. Bianca Beltran there watching what is happening.
COVID didn't break our system. COVID exposed our broken systems.
Everybody is touched by this.
Your home is supposed to be a safe haven.
We cannot stand by and watch how people be thrown on the street.
I just don't want me and my son to be homeless.
We're fighting for just basic rights in housing.
Inequities are real.
We're starting to learn just how much more deadly the virus is for Black and brown people.
I'm on the bottom of the totem pole.
We see the unfairness. We hear it.
Structural racism is real.
The number of Americans without jobs is still historically high.
It took me 5 months to find a job.
Some of the children are not getting those academic needs met.
We are really in the great need. If a family has resource and opportunity, the child is, in many cases, already ahead.
People now are taking the blinders off.
The question is simple. Do you believe that everyone should have what you have?
This Sunday, a KMBC 9 primetime documentary, Chronicle, a Systemic Pandemic, Sunday at 9 on KMBC 9.
Coronavirus cases continue to rise.
This is a look at daily coronavirus
Here are the latest
cases.
numbers
77 new
coronavirus cases.
COVID-19 were reported.
Here's a look at the rolling average of daily new cases.
New map of the confirmed cases of COVID-19 by zip code show a high concentration in the most economically disenfranchised areas in Kansas City.
COVID didn't break our systems. COVID exposed our broken systems.
When you talk about housing complexes and apartment complexes and housing projects and doubling up as a family just to have a place to live, that privilege of social distancing just does not exist.
We're starting to learn just how much more deadly the virus is for Black and brown people.
It's something in this apartment. And it's like every time I come in this apartment, it's like I can barely breathe. It makes me very, very, very sick.
We see the unfairness. We hear it.
Uh-oh. Hexagon. Nice, hexagon. That's a hard one.
Square.
Square, great.
Simplest form is the haves and the have-nots.
Even people living in poverty need to have a voice.
There's privilege to certain people, for sure. And the ones like us, we catch the other end of it.
I knew we had our numbers were high, But my goodness, they've increased so much, and there is a need.
Big breaths with me.
There's more work to be done. People now are taking the blinders off to see what's exactly going on.
I'm Matt Fleener. Since the pandemic began, we've heard we're all in this together. But the evidence shows that's not true. COVID-19 has magnified the cracks in systems of healthcare, education, housing, and poverty, and at the same time shows how those cracks disproportionately affect people of color. We want to show you how by magnifying the stories of people often overlooked and the people trying to help them through arguably the toughest time of their lives.
KMBC 9 News starts with first alert weather.
Tornado damage tonight after strong storms sweep across the metro.
Saw the clouds beginning to swirl a little bit, and then I saw a funnel form.
The first tornado warnings of the season.
There are no rules as far as tornadoes are concerned.
Goes through your mind when you see this damage like this.
This is Kansas.
Mostly south of the I-70 corridor, a few hail reports and a couple of tornadoes, but things are much calmer now. We'll see how long that trend lasts. Straight ahead.
Good evening, I'm Laura Moritz. Things are calmer now, but some people are left with damage after hours of tornadic activity. News Chopper 9 giving us our only view from the sky of the storms across Johnson County, Kansas this afternoon. We know some homes are damaged, but so far no reports of any injuries. We have our crews in the Stillwell area where the worst of the damage was reported. We have team coverage tonight. We begin with our Jackson Kurtz live near 193rd and Antioch.
Well, you can see damage from the storm throughout the neighborhood. We're right by a huge pile of debris, tree limbs, anything else scattered throughout people's homes. People spent a couple hours going through their neighbors' yards, picking up anything they found from this storm. A couple homes were hit pretty hard, but thankfully no one was hurt.
I heard the sirens go off.
I saw the cloud beginning to twirl a little bit, and then I saw a funnel form.
Trees, gutters, and other debris scattered across the South Johnson County neighborhood after county emergency officials say a tornado touched down around 4:30.
See up here how it pulled apart?
It didn't last long, but neighbors say its destruction definitely left its mark.
This whole side is going to have to be replaced. It could have been a lot worse.
Part of one neighbor's roof collapsed while they took shelter in their basement.
I could hear hail on the downstairs window, and then I actually felt the whole porch kind of move. The attic on the back side, I think, is completely torn off.
Now in the storm's aftermath, neighbors and friends are cleaning up to help those in need.
I mean, this all can be replaced here, but people's lives can't be.
And Johnson County emergency crews will be assessing the neighborhood to make sure no other homes were damaged from the storm, and then they'll report their findings to the National Weather Service. Live in Johnson County tonight, Jackson Kurtz, KMBC 9 News.
And our Brian Johnson is just a few streets over, covering the damage near 191st and Hardy.
Yeah, neighbors say they heard the sound of a tornado after a massive amount of hail. And take a look at the damage behind us over here. This is what's left of a trampoline that was twisted and mangled. And over here, there's some sheet metal wrapped around this telephone pole wire. You can see it is now twisted in place. Neighbors say they were not expecting this.
A startling sight for people on the Lee Summit Highway this afternoon. A pilot was forced to make an emergency landing after an engine failed in his plane. On the left, you're looking at video from Nate Frazier of the plane actually landing on I-470. And News Chopper 9 gave us the only viewpoint from the sky. Nobody was hurt, but it did block traffic for hours. Good evening, I'm Laura Moritz. The plane went down in the eastbound lanes just past Douglas Street. The pilot was trying to make it just a few miles further to Lee Summit Airport, and that's where KMBC 9's Brian Johnson is standing by live. And Brian, you spoke with someone who saw this whole thing happen.
Yeah, and this will be an experience that they never forget. In the airport's entire history, think of this, an plane has been forced to land on the interstate nearby only 3 times in the airport's entire history. Now, late tonight, we saw the plane outside the hangar out here, and after that engine failure, only the left engine is still working. From On the Douglas Street Bridge, Mary and Galen Coop saw the plane coming down.
And I go, oh my gosh, that plane's low.
She says she could hear the engine was off and it might not make it to the airport.
At first it looked like he was lining up with the median strip to make a crash landing in the middle. And I think, well, he looked over and sees he's going about the same speed as the traffic, and the traffic had an opening.
He could have hit a car. He could have hit the ground and exploded. I mean, it was wild. It happened so quickly.
Incredibly, the plane landed safely in between traffic. No people hurt, no cars hit, and the plane stopped before hitting the overpass bridge.
I can't imagine what was going through his mind, so it's crazy.
The only scratch came when the plane grazed a DOT sign.
Anytime you're landing any kind of aircraft on a major interstate and you can come out with 0 injuries and no real collateral damage, that's just short of a miracle, right?
While traffic was interrupted, people gathered to see it in person.
Just got home from work and noticed the road blocked off, and then I looked up the street and saw the plane in the middle of the highway, and since then it's grown into quite the spectacle. So
in the end, a pickup truck sent from the airport pulled the plane back to the hangar.
But that pilot, to me, I thought, we watched him and he really took that down and did a great job. I think they got it.
In Lee Summit, Brian Johnson, KMBC 9 News.
It is just amazing, isn't it? And nobody was hurt. We looked into the plane's registration. According to the FAA, Cyrus Hund from Kansas City, Missouri owns the plane. He bought it last year. We don't know if he was the pilot during today's incident. We reached out to him but did not immediately hear back.
The plane is at 470 in Colburn. PD wants you to shut the highway down back at 50, 470 eastbound at 50.
And that's a recording of the emergency dispatch responding to 911 calls of the plane on the interstate. The FAA is now investigating.
The latest developments in Kansas and Missouri. This is Election Day coverage from KMBC 9 News.
I feel like it's the most important election that I've ever been a part of.
After months of waiting, Election Day is finally here. At the top of the ticket, the fight for the White House.
We are going to win back the White House.
Power to change this country is in your hands.
In Missouri, voters are choosing the next governor, and in Kansas, they're sending a new senator to Washington.
Every vote matters, so I thought I'd get mine in and contribute to this new election.
Kansas Cityans and voters across the country are turning out like never before. Your 2020 commitment coverage starts right now.
It is Election Day in America, and polls are open on both sides of the state line. We are just an hour away from the first polls closing in our area at 7 o'clock. If you are in line before then, you can still cast your vote. Good evening. I'm Laura Moritz.
And I'm Chris Katz. Almost 100 million voters voted before today, with millions lining up later today at polling places all over the country. We have team coverage across Kansas and Missouri tonight with decades of experience covering the races for this special hour-long edition of KMBC 9 News.
There are battleground states such as Florida, North Carolina, Georgia that are too close to call. Texas is another one. So we're very early on in counting these votes.
You can throw Michigan, Wisconsin, and maybe even Arizona into that mix as well. Question on many minds, what's being done to protect your vote?
Investigative reporter Matt Fleener shows us the process.
Laura and Chris, it's actually been a pretty smooth process on both sides of the state line. We're here at the Kansas City Election Board tonight. They're just finishing up tallying the results here, just a few employees that are left. There was one issue with curbside voting here at Union Station today. The one issue we did find was a very long line for voters who tested positive for COVID-19 or did have exposure. Now, voters had issues knowing where to go throughout the day, so the board highly encouraged voters to come here to Union Station today. Now, the Kansas Election Board of Directors actually said they had to work extra hard this morning to make sure they had enough capacity to handle those voters since they had so many people show up.
The one thing that did catch us a little bit off guard is we had a lot of COVID-19 voters that came down to the election board and voted, and we just had to prepare for it, and it took us a while to sort of get our act together and get them processed.
Now, we've been checking all day long. The Missouri Secretary of State did say they had a very smooth process. The Kansas Secretary of State said they did have a few robocalls telling people to stay home today, but that was not a widespread issue. All in all, very good news that pretty much on both sides of the state line, very smooth process today.
Our Brian Johnson right outside the offices of the Johnson County, Kansas Board of Elections in Olathe. And with so much advance voting in Johnson County, really Election Day turned out to be pleasantly quiet in Johnson County.
It was for them. The biggest rush we saw was all the moving trucks tonight, bringing all those ballots and the machines back from the 176 polling locations throughout Johnson County. But a really calm night. Around 7 o'clock, we had the election workers come out here to grab the final ballots from these ballot box drop-off location here. And by 8:30, really things were quiet. Tonight, all of the ballots that we're going to get are in. Advanced voting is done. In-person ballots have been counted, the preliminary results at least. 74% turnout, 336,000 votes, 230,000+ of those were from advanced voting. So it was an actual low turnout at the polls today. Election officials were predicting possibly hitting the 80% turnout, but that didn't quite happen. And now is just the waiting for all of the rest of the results in the election that have some voters concerned.
Well, we'll see it by the end of the week, I guess, how it ends. Then I'll know how I feel.
I feel that right now we are torn apart and we need some unity. And this country's just in a bad place. It's never been before.
And of course, it is able to call the races, but there are still a few more ballots coming in. Mail-in ballots that were postmarked today, they can be counted on Friday, as well as provisional ballots will be counted sometime next week.
Susanna Salter was the first elected woman mayor in the country. I think it's hilarious that it really was supposed to be a joke, and the joke was on them because she ended up winning.
History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes.
You can see how it would be somewhat easy to miss stories. Oh, right here. Yeah. How is this Susanna Medora Salter of Argonia, Kansas?
It says female mayors are no good.
If you did this, you were considered pretty radical.
She's kind of paved the way for women. It is pretty cool. It really is.
Women do stuff all the time, but they're not thinking over 100 years ago.
Kansas was...
I hope that such equality could be carried out in other fields.
It was exceptional. It was a fascinating history.
The women got together and said, we need to be together and we need to have a vote.
The first women's lib movement met with victory on August 26, 1920, when their right to vote was recognized by the Congress.
There's so many of the same themes and issues that show up today were showing up in the 19th century.
I think that those ideas still exist. We are still hearing those kind of sexist things.
She raises her voice, and when a lot of women do...
She knew how it made her look, so alternately soppy and bitchy. She'd stop it, but she can't help herself, can she?
When she comes on television, I involuntarily cross my legs.
Men are allowing women to take over the world.
It is, quite frankly, revolting and disturbing and extremely troublesome.
I can throw a punch as good as I can take one.
Oh, I still think that we're fighting against a mindset, right, that somehow women are not capable.
Equality's coming. We're not there yet.
The women ran and the women won.
It's really starting from the beginning of kids thinking about what is even possible for them to even do.
The story of Kansas's trailblazing women starts long ago, years before the start of the Civil War.
This Bleeding Kansas era that really defined this state, and Missouri as well. I mean, literally, this state shed blood in order to have it be a free state.
Kansas was founded on principles of freedom. It came with a price. Kansas abolitionists fought pro-slavery groups in violent and often bloody battles.
What does it mean to be free was a question that continued to be brought up time and time again. And women really used that to their benefit when they were fighting for their own equal rights.